Hello and welcome to Achieving Employment Equity, What Sector Initiatives Can Do. My name is Jim Torrance of the National Network of Sector Partners, and I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar. I'm joined in our offices here in Oakland, California by Laverne Gardner, our office manager, who's going to be providing technical support and taking your questions. So Laverne, thanks for helping out today.
You're welcome.
We have a fantastic panel today. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce them briefly in the order in which they will be talking. We're going to start by talking with Algernon Austin, who directs the Race, Ethnicity, and the Economy program at Economic Policy Institute. And that program works to advance policies that enable people of color to participate fully in the American economy and benefit equitably from gains in prosperity. And as the director, Algernon oversees reports and policy analyses on the economic conditions of America's people of color. And is, among other things, also a member of the advisory committee for the Insight Center's Achieving Employment Equity Initiative, and is a member of our Experts of Color network associated with the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative. So Algernon, thank you so much for being on the webinar today.
My pleasure.
Next, we'll talk with John Gardner, who is the Director of Business Services at Work Systems, which is Portland, Oregon's public workforce agency, and he's also the Workforce Investment Manager at Construction Apprenticeship and Workforce Solutions, which is a membership organization created by the construction industry to increase the representation of people of color and women in the construction trades. And as the Director of Business Services, he manages industry engagement, he supports economic recruitment, and he is overall responsible for workforce work systems targeted sector strategy, and he also, as I mentioned, supports cause. So, John, thank you so much for being on today and sharing your expertise about this topic.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Finally, we're going to talk with two representatives of Restaurant Opportunity Centers United about employment disparities in the restaurant sector and what ROC-United is doing to fight them. Saru Jayaraman is the co-founder and director of ROC-United, and she's also director of the Food Labor Research Center at UC Berkeley. And just for those of you who don't know, after 9/11, displaced workers from World Trade Center, she co-founded with them ROC in New York, and it's organized restaurant workers to win workplace justice campaigns, conduct research and policy work, partner with responsible restaurants, and launch cooperatively owned restaurants. And they've since expanded to, I don't know whether it's 19 cities nationwide or more now. It seems like it's been growing exponentially.
Yes, it's more than 20, yes.
It's more than 20 now. I can't keep up. So Saru, thank you for being on the call.
Thank you for having me.
And Nin is also with ROC-United, and she's the National High Road Coordinator. And before joining ROC, she was with Slow Food USA, where she focused on introducing a race, class, gender, and worker analysis to the sustainable food movement. And she's also the board chair of CoFed, which is a startup nonprofit that trains students to start cooperatively run sustainable food enterprises on campus, including community colleges. Very, very relevant past experience and current role. Nim, thank you for being on the call.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So I do want to make sure that you all know how to operate your webinar console to participate fully in today's session. So I'll just run through a few things. To open and control and close this panel, there's an arrow up at the upper left. You can click it to make it disappear. You click it again to bring it back. There are two ways to listen, and if you hear me, you're using one of them. If it happens that the one you're using is a webinar, so don't feel that you have to measurable differences in by structuring such as, say, level of educational attainment, actually. And we want to think at that structural level, even as I know that as initiatives, we work individually with people to help them with their employment goals. As far as employment equity, that's our goal. And I'll say that it's more than just the absence of discrimination. It's more than a level playing field because people don't start at the same position on the field and don't all have the same advantages. And it'll be achieved when people from all groups enjoy equal employment opportunities. We think that that'll be observable as the absence of the disparities that I mentioned, and that the result will benefit industries who will have expanded labor pools. It will benefit communities, which will have greater economic vitality, and it will benefit the economy as a whole. So, but it won't happen by accident. It's going to take intentional effort to achieve. So with that said, let's start today's discussion with just a look at what research tells us about the scope and nature of employment disparities in this country. And as we hear from Algernon Austin, I hope you'll think about what you yourself know and don't know about the employment disparities that are experienced by different groups in your area or your industry of focus. And think about what you would like to know and how you go about finding out. And of course, we'll also pause for questions after Algernon's comments, so please type them in as they occur to you, because they will queue up quickly. With that said, Algernon, why don't I turn it over to you to share some of what you found in your research.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm going to just do a very quick overview of the key challenges that Latino and African American workers face in the labor market. So let's just go to the next slide, please. And first, there's the issue of getting jobs. Unfortunately, in the American economy, and particularly today, not everyone who wants a job can get a job. But there have been some persistent disparities based on race. And here in this slide shows the, oops, 1 second, I just lost it in my screen. Okay, so this slide shows the ratio of the Latino unemployment rate to the white unemployment rate and the black unemployment rate to the white unemployment rate for 3 metropolitan areas. In the Chicago metropolitan area in 2011, what this shows is that the Latino unemployment rate was 1.5 times the white unemployment rate. For blacks, the black rate was 2.5 times the white unemployment rate. And you can see a similar pattern in the New York metropolitan area, in the Los Angeles metropolitan area, and in several other metropolitan areas across the country. Unfortunately, the picture is quite similar. So for both Latinos and African Americans, although they want to work, they're less likely to be able to find a job, and it's particularly high for African Americans. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the share of workers not earning enough to lift a family of 4 above the poverty level. And here you can see that really it's much too high for all groups, but Hispanics have the highest rate in 2011 of 43.3% of Hispanic workers didn't earn enough to lift the family out of poverty. For blacks, it was 36%, and for white, 23.4%. So particularly for Hispanics, the issue of low wages is quite a significant one. But again, it's really, given how wealthy we are as a country and given the growing inequality, if we had if we're structurally different, these rates would be much lower than for all groups. Next slide, please. So this is some findings of a study that looked at workers in the non-college labor market, so jobs that did not require a 4-year college degree. And this analysis controlled for a number of factors, including age, sex, immigrant status, education and training, the requirements of the job, the characteristics of the firm. So what it says, or what it shows, is that when you look at workers that are similar in terms of their background, similar in terms of the education and in terms of their education and training, similar in terms of the work that they're doing in similar industries and similar firms, we still find, despite all of those similarities, we still find that Latino and black workers earn less than similar white workers. For Latino workers on average earn 4.2% less, and for black workers it was 12.2% less. The Latino difference was not statistically significant, but it's the fact that it's a significant negative is reason for concern. The black difference, of course, is quite large, especially when you consider that these are individuals with similar education, training, and other characteristics. Next slide. And this is findings from an excellent study done by Public-Private Ventures looking at sectoral employment. And you can find it on the web, so I won't go into too much details. But what it's showing here is the average earnings after people completed sectoral employment training programs. The treatment bar is the earnings of people who went through the sectoral program. The control are people who did not go through the sectoral program. And the positive is that for both blacks and Latinos, there were significant gains in terms of earnings. So the training and the jobs that they received after going through the sectoral initiative did boost their earnings. So that's the big positive. One issue of concern is that the impact, the gain for Latinos is about twice as large as the gain for blacks. So I think going forward, people who are running sectoral initiatives, one, should collect data so that they can really assess who's coming into their programs in terms of race and ethnicity, who are being placed in jobs in terms of race and ethnicity, but also to track and see whether they're seeing similar disparities, and also to keep in mind these challenges so that they may need to use their networks and connections, sort of flex those muscles a little stronger to see that black workers are placed in good jobs. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Algernon, thank you for giving the quick overview. I want to encourage folks who have questions about what data shows about employment disparities to submit them now. We're going to pause for just a minute to ask Algernon a few questions. And then, of course, we'll have a chance to come back and talk further down the road. I just wanted to follow up on this piece about the sector initiative study, sectoral impact study, and wonder if you have a theory about what this disparity in positive impact for African Americans as compared to other populations is attributable to. Do you have a sense of why there's a disparity?
Well, I think the discrimination that African Americans face in the labor market is particularly strong. So there's this study, but also the prior one, looking at the non-college labor market overall, where again we saw a pretty strong wage penalty for black workers. So I think it's just people like to point to President Obama and talk about being post-racial, but we have significant challenges in the American labor market for black workers. There's strong evidence of discrimination in the labor market for blacks and for other groups, but I think it's been particularly difficult for blacks for a number of reasons.
So I just moved back to this slide with the wage penalty, and it sounds like what you're saying is that this wage penalty applies even to those who have participated in a successful sectoral initiative, and that maybe some intentional effort to address this kind of discrimination is necessary in order to mitigate this gap. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yes. I mean, this slide is not based on this is not a sectoral study. This is a study of the entire non-college labor market. So I think, I mean, in here the gap is about 3 times. In the sectoral initiative, if I don't know how nationally representative the next one is, it's about 2 times. So it's possible that sectoral approaches are doing somewhat better than average, but I think there just is a strong bias against black workers and difficulties, and you can see this there in several different studies. So it is something, I think. One thing that I didn't get into. There's also concern about placement of black workers. So even getting access to the jobs, I think, is something that people should be concerned about running sectoral programs that, although the black workers may have the training, employers may still have biases that make them reluctant to hire blacks. And if blacks are hired, are they getting wages similar to other workers with the same levels of education and training? Is a second challenge.
All right. I want to ask you one further question, and that's about this earnings gap that you show here, and particularly the concentration of African Americans and Latinos in low-wage jobs. That to me is what this identifies. Is this an indicator of occupational segregation for workers of color?
Yes, that's part of it. You do see, if you look at different industries, you will find that blacks and Hispanics tend to be concentrated in the lower-paying jobs within a wide range of industries. You see it in construction, you see it in transportation, you see it in service, where blacks and Hispanics tend to occupy the lower-paying jobs.
Mm-hmm. There's one other question that's been submitted that has to do with the role of differential levels of incarceration or prior criminal experience or ex-offender status. So have you looked at the impact of differential rates of incarceration on employment outcomes?
Yeah, so that does have an impact. We know that employers are less likely to hire someone who is an ex-offender than someone who does not have a criminal record. So that certainly plays a role. There's some research suggests that employers tend to assume that some employers may assume that a black candidate has a criminal record, regardless of whether they know that to be a fact or not. So there is that negative. However, we also know from audit studies that compares, for example, there have been studies where TED audit studies or peer tester studies. These are studies where individuals are sent out to apply for jobs, and there have been studies done where the individuals will half the time they'll say they have a criminal record, half the time they would say that they do not have a criminal record. And that research has shown that white males with a criminal record do about as well in terms of obtaining jobs as black males who do not have a criminal record. So yes, having a criminal record is a negative, but also race in and of itself is also a very big negative and a very big challenge. So, and of course the interplay if you're black and you have a criminal record, that's certainly two very difficult challenges for you in the labor market.
Mm-hmm. Well, Algernon, thank you for sharing that background with some of the research background for understanding the problem of disparities. And we will have a chance for folks to continue to ask questions later in the session. I want to move now to John Gardner from Work Systems. And we're going to hear about the work that he and Work Systems in Portland have done to advance the cause of employment equity in the construction sector. And John, maybe there will be a chance for you to talk about some of the criminal background issues that we were just highlighting, because I know that that can be an issue in the construction sector. And as you listen to John, I'd like to ask you to identify principles or elements of the work that he describes that you could implement in your area, even if your focus is on a different industry sector. And if you'll type those in as you hear them, I will read some of those when we pause for questions. Anything that you think is a best practice and that's something that either you're already doing or you might like to try or that you think would have an impact where you are. And of course, please send questions as we go through, because we do want to hear your questions. Okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to advance this slide because it's not going. There we go. And John, why don't I let you take it away?
All right, thanks, Jim. And I think what I would ask folks to do is sort of listen to our approach, and hopefully, as Jim said, some of our strategies related to how we view sector will sort of resonate with what you're trying to do in your local efforts. So maybe just a little bit of so Jim can just give you more to set the stage. So WSI's primary role is to serve as the workforce intermediary for our region. We act as the convener and coordinator of regional employment and training programs for the City of Portland and Multnomah and Washington counties for Northwest Oregon. Over the years, we have a long history of developing and improving employment and training services to help at-risk youth, unemployed adults, and dislocated workers in support of regional business needs. And although we manage a universal employment and training system in WorkSource Portland Metro, which serves as our region's one-stop system, we do so in a way that targets those that are underserved, barriered, or minority individuals. So in 2009, the employer-led organization known as CAUSE approached WSI for help. CAUSE was funded with the goal of achieving greater equity in the construction industry, but after a few years of mixed results, they came to WSI for support in achieving their mission. They wanted us to work with them to develop a systemic approach to increasing the number of women and people of color in registered apprenticeship. They asked for WSI's help in achieving real results and strengthening their outcomes. Thus was born our construction sector partnership. Now I know we were fortunate because normally this is not how it works. We had a regional construction industry group of employers and stakeholders coming for help with developing systemic approaches to solving workforce issues related to pipeline, policy, coordination, all leading to tangible results for targeted populations. But we weren't going to look to skip horse in the mouth. In hindsight, we didn't automatically know that this would take a sector's approach to move the mission of CAUSE forward, but that's exactly what we've done. Next slide, please. So as I say, timing is everything. And for those of you who know construction, you know that it's still recovering from the losses suffered during the recession and the years leading up to it. In Oregon alone, we lost over 39,000 construction jobs, and between 2006 and 2010, pushing the state unemployment rate above 12%. To complicate matters, Oregon had a dismal record when it came to underrepresentation of women and minorities in the trades. But despite all these challenges of barriers facing females and people of color wanting to enter the industry, the construction industry still represents a great pathway to attaining family wage jobs. And registered apprenticeship is the key to journey-level status that brings with it the ability to travel across states with a recognized credential and to command a high salary. And potentially, if it's your desire, start your own business. So as I said earlier, timing is everything, and clearly our timing was bad based on the just general unemployment rate you see here, that across carpenters and laborers in Oregon at the time, there's a 20 to 30% unemployment rate in 2009. And sort of speaking to what I think Algernon said earlier, African Americans fared even worse, or I should say worse amongst all minorities trying to enter and succeed in the construction trades, where they only were able to achieve basically a 19% completion rate from apprentice to journey level, the worst of all ethnic minorities in our region trying to enter the construction trades. So next slide, please. Now, despite the challenges the industry faced, we still have found ways to successfully connect women and people of color to the skills training and career pathways and employment that would prepare them for the industry as it begins to grow again. When private construction failed, we focused on public. When public stalled, we invested in green building and career pathways through residential retrofit and energy efficiency careers, also working to connect job seekers to the opportunities in highway and bridge construction, which has also been picking up. All the while working with businesses, training, and community partners to build the capacity of the region's pre-apprenticeship training programs while reaching out to the regional high school and voc tech ed programs, knowing that at the end of the day, it's still about pipeline. So even in trying times, you can get a sense of some of the successes we've had over the last 4 years. Next slide, please. So as CAUSE and WSI have worked to strengthen and increase the pool of qualified and diverse workers across the region in support of the building the supply, we have also used our organizational strengths of systems and policy development and alignment to develop, lead, facilitate, and sometimes just participate in a number of large-scale contract and policy initiatives and strategies targeted at increasing demand for a diverse workforce. In 2011, through our Diversity and Workforce Construction Committee, we worked with regional public owners like our area's housing authority, our county, our Portland Development Commission, the City of Portland, our regional transportation system, our Portland Public School System, and our Housing Bureau on developing a contracting template that could be used across public projects that would set out universal standards for diversity of the workforce and the contracting community, with the hope of setting aside resources for the region's pre-apprenticeship programs to strengthen the quality and consistency of the training they were providing to diverse community members. It was this work with the Diversity and Construction Committee and our parallel work with our other large construction and equity initiatives in collaboration that over time gained enough momentum to lead to significant policy changes, investment strategies, and new contracting standards. Throughout the years, we've served primarily as a convener, working to align efforts where possible and leverage resources to address skill gaps, emerging workforce needs, inclusion issues, and business needs, and all the while looking towards general community benefits. Next slide. So by now, you all know or possibly heard, that the sector initiatives are industry-focused efforts that benefit all workers, the industry in which they work, and their communities. And sector initiatives accomplish this by improving skills and employment opportunities, especially for low-income individuals, and by changing industry practices related to public policies and public institutions with which workers and the industry interact. One of the best examples that we've been a part of has been Clean Energy Works Oregon. So if you haven't heard, Clean Energy Works Oregon has been a nationally recognized sustainable residential retrofit program. CAUSE and WSI and our public workforce system have worked with Clean Energy Works Portland, now Clean Energy Works Oregon, since the beginning. We were there before there was a program, when there was really just American Recovery Act resources looking for a project. Luckily, we had local leadership and a gentleman named Derek Smith with the Portland Office of Planning and Sustainability that had just the thing, an on-bill triple bottom line approach to providing residential retrofits on a citywide scale. All he was missing was a high roads methodology. We introduced the idea of a community benefit agreement, that we, as part of a very large coalition of contractors and community-based organizations and unions and staff, helped craft into a community workforce agreement. We helped develop the initial workforce goals, articulate the training pathways, we designated training programs and identified industry-recognized certification standards, and worked with the workforce board to fund the initial training and recruitment needs of contractors and workers. But we ultimately needed groups like Green for All and folks like Jeremy Hayes to help us organize our efforts and push it through City Council to be adopted as a contracting standard approach to launching the pilot initiative. Next slide, please. So what did the Community Workforce Agreement accomplish, and what were those goals? For the first time, we had public dollars tied to contracting expectations with local hiring standards and expectations of wage of 180% above minimum. And for weatherization at the time, the wages were anywhere from minimum wage to $12 to $13 an hour, especially for non-union shops. So this represented a significant increase in the standard of living of folks doing that work. We targeted 100% health insurance, and as you can see, we got fairly close. Many of the small contractors doing the work instead were able to pay a wage benefit because they weren't able to afford group insurance. We established a 30% ethnic, minority, and female workforce goal, and you can see that we've done very good in terms of beating that. Obviously, and you'll see this in our construction data as well, women participation in the construction trade still falls way behind. But we think we've been able to show proof of concept that by setting these goals, industry responds. And the point about hiring from a designated training provider, what that does is it allows us to create direct pipelines from community-based organizations to these training programs to ensure that there's a qualified pool of diverse workers that are from the communities in which the work is actually happening. At the end of the day, what the Community Workforce Agreement really did for us is it allowed us to demonstrate proof of concept. You can get a sense for the amount of projects that have happened and the amount of jobs that were created. And I think to date, this project has done over 2,500 homes and is shooting for another 3,000 in the next 12 months. Next slide. As they say, chance favors the prepared mind. So when we were asked, CAUSE and WSI, to chair the City of Portland's Disparity Forum related to disparity in contracting across city entities, we jumped at the chance. Over the course of 5 months, we used the lessons learned with Clean Energy Works Oregon and the other initiatives you saw earlier to develop recommendations, many of which we were holding on to since 2009, to sort of make changes in the city's contracting approach. Those in bold were ultimately adopted through city resolutions by the City Council last summer. Those that are not in bold were added into a separate City Council resolution on community benefit agreements last fall. My point in showing you all this slide is just to show you some of the history and different strategies that were employed to continue towards working our shared goals, and to see how stackable progress allowed us to keep sort of a sectoral strategy that ultimately had benefits for workers and contractors moving forward. So the community benefit agreement that followed the city's resolution on equitable workforce and contracting in many ways is the culmination of much of our sector work. It stands as a self-sustaining contract and policy model that provides an approach to continuous engagement of the very partners necessary for a successful sector strategy, all working towards sub-goals that overlap and are interdependent for project success. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know what's in a community benefit agreement or in CBA, this is just a quick glance. So our CBA has a local hiring focus on hub zones, which predominantly represent low-income areas, and requires 50% of the total workforce to come from within 30 miles of the local region. We also identify career pathways. So it's not enough to bring greater awareness to the masses about the opportunities that exist within construction. They have to understand how to get in and what the prerequisites are. Clearly, as you saw earlier, workforce diversity goals are at the heart of the Community Benefit Agreement, as they were at the heart of the Community Workforce Agreement. And what we've been able to do is establish a 27% ethnic minority male and female participation goals, divided as you can see, to make sure not just apprentices are being judged in terms of the inclusion goals, but the total workforce. So this 27% total goal applies to journey level and apprentices across project-wide workforces. And you can see that's a pretty big leap from federal standards of 6.9% for women and 4.5% for ethnic minority The other thing that we're pretty proud of is the utilization of minority and women-owned firms. So when the Disparity study was launched and came back, the numbers related to how many women and minority and disadvantaged business enterprises was incredibly low. So what we've gotten, the 2 pilot agreements I'll talk about in a moment, is a 12% set aside for all contracting resources to go through a minority or women-owned firms. Again, partnering with the very businesses that we need to have hire the workers we produce and making sure that they get benefits from the work as well. The other thing, from a training aspect, I'm incredibly proud that we've achieved through the Community Benefit Agreement our resources. 1/2 of 1% of all the resources spent on hard construction costs for city-funded projects that have a CBA will go into occupational skills training, specifically targeted towards women, people of color, low-income, underrepresented individuals. 1/4 of that 1% will go into technical assistance to minority and women-owned contracting firms so they can first successfully complete the work of the project, but also build capacity to bid on future projects. And there's also money set aside for compliance to allow community members and partnering organizations to oversee the actual compliance of the project to ensure that we are achieving the goals or redirecting contractors through technical assistance that we set out in the first place. Next slide, please. So this sort of sector approach slide is really sort of standard sector strategies tied next to things that I think are potentially replicable where any of you all are out there listening. So I won't spend a lot of time on here. Needless to say that it starts with partnerships. Business partnerships crucial, obviously depending on the sector, unions or industry associations and the training systems that are going to be necessary. There always will be an issue of funding, but I wouldn't let that sort of deter you from beginning the approach, because if you're able to actually solve industry needs, funding will start to follow your strategic plans. But this is just sort of a map of some of the things that we've done related to our sectoral approach. Next slide, please. So, and I touched upon this a little bit, and I can't say it enough. So, you know, everyone's heard the saying, it takes a village. In the case of our sector approach, it's taken the village elders, the builders, the village union members, the citizens of the village. I mean, this is just a small snapshot of all the organizations that have lent their efforts to making our community workforce agreement with CWEL a success, but more recently our community benefit a success in terms of launching it and getting projects identified. So we were able to get representatives of the major unions to participate, many contractors, obviously our local elected and government folks, but a lot of the folks you see on this slide are community-based organizations and local nonprofits, some of which you might have heard of, like Oregon Tradeswomen, who has a national reputation of providing women with pre-apprenticeship training programs, or a NEA Family Center, which serves the largest native urban population in the country. So it's been basically, I don't want to represent our involvement. We've been, I think, an intermediary, the convener, and a leverage point, but it's taken the work of a lot of other organizations to make these sector strategies bear fruit. Next slide. So where are we at now? I'm sorry, next slide.
Sorry, John. Technical difficulties. I'll get right on it.
That's okay. So where we're at now is just the continuing oversight of the projects we have. We have 2 large construction projects, as well as Clean Energy Works Oregon, that are still going on, that we have oversight and steering committees sort of monitoring the progress. The Community Benefit Agreement is applying to about $72 million worth of hard construction costs, which has allowed for $720,000 to be set aside for the training and the technical assistance and the oversight for the community organizations. And so we're right in the process of procuring for those services and establishing our oversight and compliance committees and sort of having a chance to look at the data, as you saw earlier, through Clean Energy Works Oregon, but also through GOLI and the graduation rates, to make sure we're developing a process that our partners can connect their job seekers to and that employers can hire from. And so we can think in maybe the next 6 to 12 months if it's time to raise the goals based on our ability to achieve the goals of these initial offerings. And of course, we're always looking to identify the next community benefit project, because it is those projects that will sustain the demand that allow our sector strategies to actually produce the qualified workers that the industry needs. I mean, the good news and the bad news is demographics don't change and the workforce is aging. So our hope is that through our sectoral approach, the new workforce can be much more representative of our community at large. So I think the only last slide beyond the one you didn't see was one to just talk about some of the policies and the documents I referenced that I'd love to make available to everyone on the call. Yeah, it's the slide after this. The interesting thing about this is we actually had about 400 people attend the City Council meeting where we had the City Council pass the resolution on community benefit agreements, and we all wore shirts that said community benefits for all. And I think it was one of the reasons no one actually spoke out against moving forward with the community benefit agreements, which you can imagine has some detractors. Yeah, and I think the last slide after this just lists some of the documents we've made available, like our model community benefit agreement, as well as the model community workforce agreement. So if individuals out there listening want to potentially see how they can adopt those examples are for you, there for you. All right, thank you very much.
John, I'm sorry about that. I hope we got the slides. I can cycle back to any that we didn't get to while we were having our technical difficulty here. I want to say that this morning, to those who had registered by the end of the day yesterday, we sent some of these materials. We'll send them all as part of the follow-up to this session. And I do have a few questions that have come in that I'd love to share with you. One of them has to do with kind of the point that you were just making about what kind of opposition there has been and what's been mitigating that opposition. So can you talk a little bit about who might have been opposed to some of these changes, and how was that opposition addressed?
Yeah, and I think it's I think initially the way to get around opposition, and there's always you're never going to get everyone, but I think that's really where the sort of the sector approach about partnerships. So we work with industry associations, both union and non-union, understanding that potentially different groups would think of this as a work grab. I think potentially related to the community benefit agreement, some non-union employers are concerned that there's a lot of language that is pro-union or pro-apprenticeship, which tends to be run in Oregon at least by union contractors. But the good news is that because of the equity expectations, it's sort of an equal playing field. It's really more about the contractor who wins the bid on a job being able to provide a qualified worker, female and male, as part of their workforce. And so that sort of broadens and creates pressure on the unions to work with the sort of community partners that develop those qualified workers, but it also sort of removes sort of the potential bind that a non-union shop would have with being able to provide the workforce. I think people don't like the idea of goals. So, and I'll just be clear, these are aspirational goals, but there are sort of penalties for contractors who don't make these goals. So I think some people think these things will work themselves out, but we've noticed that when an owner or the funder of a building project sets forth sort of expectations, the contracting community tends to rise to the occasion. So I think the biggest thing was potentially the union versus non-union sentiment that was out there, and just the going to scale. So the community workforce agreement for clean energy works is great, but that's a residential model, and we're moving into sort of a commercial and vertical model here. So I think there were some detractors, but after the resolution was passed, we haven't heard anything, so we're just moving forward with the project.
So it sounds like the key consideration for potential opponents was simply whether there would be a level playing field for them, and also concerns about being able to make the goals and the potential penalties that might ensue if they didn't.
That's correct. And I mean, that's the good news of having so many really outstanding community-based organizations sort of really trying to do greater awareness about the careers in the trades, and at the same time having sort of employer-vetted training programs for them to go into. So then candidates coming out are qualified. We're not asking people to sacrifice the quality of their workforce to meet an employment workforce goal. What we're saying is let's work together to make sure you're getting the right people who are right for your industry. So everybody has to work together to make this work, whether you're a contractor, a trade, a union, or an owner. And so far it's working.
So does the existence of this community workforce agreement or community benefits agreement and the need for those contractors to recruit a diverse pool of workers change your relationship to them in some way as a potential provider of workers?
Yes, I mean, and one of the things I think on an earlier slide that we're trying to do, because, especially the mid to small size contractor, they don't have HR. They don't have sort of a big recruitment arm. So what we've tried to do is aggregate talent, specifically women and people, males of color talent, through a cause hiring pool, right? So what we've done is we've taken graduates from the regional pre-apprenticeship training programs, as well as individuals who we can verify their construction work history that are people of color, and we've created sort of a source pool so a contractor can call us and we can serve as a supplemental job placement for a graduate from our Constructing Hope program or our Evening Trades program. Knowing that they're all nonprofit agencies needing to do job development and outreach themselves, but also we can supplement their efforts through our local one-stop system.
Mm-hmm. So you're in some sense a solution for the employers in meeting these goals now.
Yeah, I'd say one of the solutions, yes.
Yeah, one of the solutions. There was a question on a sort of broader scale about how employers can be influenced to stop discrimination, and I was going to sort of shift it a little bit to ask what motivated employers in the first place to be interested in the diversity of their workforces. You mentioned that originally CAUSE was essentially convened by an employer group that was concerned about the diversity of their pipeline. What was their motivation, and what continues to be their interest in having a diverse workforce?
Yeah, and I didn't put this in the background, but initially CAUSE started from the recognition of, I think, industry stakeholders and local elected officials when we had a $2 billion development project sort of in downtown Portland area, where for the first time ever, I think the general public realized that there were 2,000 construction workers working on these great projects, but there was very, very limited faces of color and females there. So enough sort of community expectations and people got a sense of what was happening and not happening in the industry, that it sort of forced progressive members of the industry to take action, and they formed CAUSE. But I think what was missing from that initial formation was just workforce development know-how, and I think instead at the time they had agreements about goals that they would achieve, but they didn't really know how to sort of create infrastructure to do that. And I think what happened since then is it's just, we wrote a white paper a few years ago about this, but it's sort of it's a business case for change. I mean, America is getting only more diverse. So, eventually contractors that can provide an owner, whether it's Intel who's building in our area or the city of Portland, a workforce that's more representative of the communities in which they're doing the projects, that's one more sort of business value add that they can present in asking and searching for jobs. But also, I mean, they're going to be competing for workers as the demographics change. And as you can see by Oregon's demographics, we're a little slower than other parts of the country. But I think the most savvy employers recognize the value of having a diverse workforce. And that's true across any sector.
So I have one more question for you before we move on to the folks from ROC-United. And it has to do with the process of forming these community benefit agreements and how the extent to which employers were involved and whether that helped also in mitigating opposition.
Yeah, I'd say that employers were definitely involved. There's two sort of thoughts there. On one hand, employers struggle, and that's where one of the bullets I think earlier on the slide said, employers struggle with changing sort of their workforce approach based on different expectations of different contracts. Right? So if one public owner says, here's what you need to do to be a successful contractor, be on the workforce on our project, and it varies by another, it's kind of hard. So having a universal standard expectation actually works in an employer's interest. So there was support there as long as it didn't sort of interfere with the employer's ability to manage the program. and I'm sorry, the project and the way that they needed to manage it. And I think having employers at the table early, especially, and even having the unions and the trade coordinators at the table early, really helped us craft an approach that recognized different expectations or needs of sort of folks that we have to have buy-in. And so we were able to get through some of those issues. You know, and at the same time, everybody wants success. They want the project to be built on time and built to scope. They want to be able to provide folks with, you know, career pathways. So giving them a vehicle that lets them just sort of show up and manage from the prime all the way down to those expectations, I think is actually very helpful to contractors.
Well, John, thank you so much for sharing this. We're going to turn now to hear from Saru Jayaraman and Min Min of ROC-United. And we will still have questions, room for questions, hopefully, at the end of the session. So, but I do want to make sure to give ROC-United a chance to talk about what you do in the restaurant industry. And just as with, as I asked before, John spoke, I'd like you all to listen for ideas, practices, and principles that you could put into effect in your area, regardless of what industry sector or sectors you focus on. And of course, send your questions as they occur to you. So I'll turn it over now to you, Sarah.
Great. And we still have 15 minutes, Jim? Or you think we're running over time?
No, we're good.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I thought I would start. This is Saru Jayaraman. And I thought I would start by giving you a little bit of background on the industry, the restaurant industry, and then to go into our model, let Min talk in particular about the workforce development and high road engagement piece of our model. But overall, we kind of wanted to talk about how, in our case, we've built a sector initiative that combines both fighting against discrimination and really, confronting equity head-on, as together with workforce development that allows people a career ladder to move up a career ladder regardless of race. So first, in terms of the industry, the restaurant industry right now is neck and neck with retail as the nation's largest private sector employer. It's the second largest private sector employer in the country. It's over 10 million employees nationwide, and one of the very few sectors of the economy to experience growth during the recent years of economic crisis. In fact, it's expected to add several million more jobs in the next several years, and now 1 in 10 Americans works in the industry. The problem with our industry is that despite being one of the largest and fastest growing, it also happens to be the lowest paying industry in America. 7 of the 10 lowest paying jobs in America, and the 2 absolute lowest paying jobs in America are restaurant jobs. And so some of you may say in the workforce world, well, why look at this industry at all? If it's all low wages, why would we care to think about how to place people in these jobs? The piece that a lot of people don't know is that there actually are really great and substantial numbers of livable wage jobs in this industry. I mean, it's so huge that the vast majority are earning low wages, but about 20%, we estimate, or 2 million jobs in the country are livable wage jobs in the restaurant industry. They mostly are wait staff and bartending positions in fine dining restaurants, and our research over the years has shown that they're largely held by white workers and men in particular. And so there are great jobs in this industry, and the real challenge for us is not just getting people into those 2 million jobs, because 10 million workers will never fit into 2 million jobs. That's why for us it really has to be about 2 things simultaneously: helping workers have the opportunity and training and skills to move up the ladder to those livable wage jobs, and breaking, confronting barriers head on that prevent them from getting those livable wage jobs, while simultaneously lifting the floor for all 10 million workers in the industry. It's really got to be about both. So the next slide just talks about our model. So ROC, given the context of this industry, we came in the scene just after 9/11. I co-founded the organization together with workers from Windows on the World, a restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center. And, you know, we were immediately overwhelmed with workers coming to us from all over the city and then all over the country asking for help, you know, because they face really low wages or what we call wage theft or just, you know, discrimination on the job or a variety of issues. And so, you know, decided that we really needed to build a multi-pronged approach to surround the industry from multiple angles and multiple stakeholders, frankly, to build power and voice for workers and create livable wage jobs. So the three prongs of our model are that we engage in workplace justice campaigns that directly confront discrimination and exploitation in high-profile restaurant companies that are taking what we call the low road to profitability. These are very high-profile, large companies where workers have told us there is pretty severe discrimination or exploitation. We use a combination of litigation, worker organizing, and community organizing to actually move these companies to the high road. At the same time, we organize and promote the high road to profitability. So we've been organizing good employers who've been doing the right thing, providing good wages and good working conditions, working with them to create a really massive training program. We train about 1,000 low-wage workers a year to move up the ladder to these livable wage jobs, opening our own worker-owned restaurants called Colors that are cooperative models of the high road. All of these elements work together to promote the high road in the industry. And then lastly, conducting just a lot of research and policy work to lift standards industry-wide. So I just want to explain that these three prongs of our model work together really synergistically to do these two things. You know, help workers move up the ladder as we are simultaneously lifting the floor. Because in our industry, you just can't do one or the other. We have to do both. So I'm going to spend a minute talking about the first prong because, you know, I think we'll spend more time talking about the second and third prongs. But in terms of this, you know, throughout this presentation, but in terms of this first prong, we've now won 13 campaigns against large, high-profile restaurant companies, exploitation and discrimination in 13 high-profile restaurant companies. And we've won over $7 million in stolen tips and wages and discrimination payments for workers through these campaigns. And I'll just give the example of the latest campaign. The latest campaign was against discrimination and exploitation in, you know, the restaurants of the most famous celebrity chef in America, Mario Batali, who owns several restaurants in New York and Las Vegas and LA, all over the country. They're a group of Latino and other workers of color approached us and said, we're being discriminated against, we're not allowed to advance to the wait staff, captain, bartending positions that are the highest paying positions in the restaurant. And so we organized them, we filed litigation, and we just won a big victory over $1 million in misappropriated tips and wages and discrimination payments. A discriminatory chef was actually let go from the restaurant, and all of the workers there was a new promotions policy put into place, and workers who wanted promotions were allowed to move up the ladder. So that's an example of the kind of campaigns we've launched against directly confronting discrimination and exploitation in the industry. Now, I'm going to skip to the research and policy prong, and then we'll come back to the high road. So if you go to the next slide, you can see our research is really vast. We've conducted more than 5,000, at this point actually more than 6,000 surveys of restaurant workers, 300 employer interviews. We've done the match pair audit testing studies that Algernon was talking about at the very beginning, where we've sent in pairs of white and people of color applicants into fine dining restaurants to see who gets hired, and found that white applicants have twice the chance of a person of color getting hired at one of these fine dining restaurants in a waitstaff or bartending position. These reports have led to over 100 media hits. We've currently got more match pairs audit testing studies being replicated around the country. We've done studies in partnership with our high road employers where we've actually documented that providing opportunities to move up the ladder, creating more equity of opportunity for advancement actually reduces turnover, increases profitability. We did a first qualitative study on that, and now we're doing a quantitative study where we're actually interviewing 1,000 employers around the country to quantitatively, show quantitatively that these practices reduce turnover, increase profitability. I have a book coming out next week called Behind the Kitchen Door that really kind of goes into depth on these issues. And we've, launched policy campaigns on the basis of all of this, and a very large multimedia, multi-year consumer engagement campaign that's engaging consumers on these very issues, on issues of racial equity, on issues of wages in this industry, and showing how these issues actually impact the consumer's dining experience. But just some very quick, data to share with you from the research. So you'll see here, as part of the match pairs audit testing studies, we've done what's called canvassing, where we've actually gone out and observed in restaurants who hold certain positions. And you can see the blue line is white workers. This is canvassing 50 fine dining restaurants in New York City. This is not rocket science to know that wait staff is, so predominantly white. Bussers and runners tend to be workers of color, and in fine dining, you don't see black workers at all in New York City. And so you see occupational segregation both by position in fine dining and then by segment, in that workers of color, and particularly black workers, are often segmented into the lower level segments, meaning fast food and casual restaurants, not even able to access fine dining restaurant jobs. So we put a lot of this into a report called The Great Service Divide. We've created a ton of videos and visuals to really document these issues. We had wanted to show you a video today that really nicely shows this. We didn't have the technology to do it, but I think Jim shared it with you, or will share it with you soon. But you can just see that the same person who created that amazing trailer for the book also created the cover of this report that we put out on occupational segregation. And what you see in this image here is a very, very real image of the industry. You can literally go, the further back you go into the restaurant, the darker the skin color gets and the lower the wage gets. And so a busser, a Latino or Bangladeshi busser in a fine dining restaurant can earn literally 1/5 of what the waiter just above him or her earns. A waiter can earn up to $100,000 a year in one of these fine dining restaurants, and the busser just below them can earn, something like, 25 or 30,000 a year. So I do want to pass it on to Nin, but before Nin speaks, I want to just say, the framing. I've set up the problem, and I've mentioned we've done a ton of research and policy work on this. But for us, this work of promoting the high road, how things could be done differently and helping workers move up the ladder, is intimately and integrally connected to the other work of directly confronting discrimination through these workplace justice campaigns, our research and our policy work, directly raising public awareness and fighting it through litigation. So I'm going to pass it on now to Nin to talk about how we promote the high road to profitability.
Thanks, Saru. Something that I'll echo that you said is that, our industry is really specific in that it's really filled with a lot of people of color. And so when we're focusing on the sector and lifting it up as a whole, you're talking about affecting the lives of millions of people of color and women and immigrants, many of them undocumented, who otherwise would not have advancement opportunities in other industries. So this is a really key industry to focus on. And so, the high road, we saw that, the picture of the restaurant industry right now isn't very pretty. And the high road is really our way of saying that there's an opportunity here to align your practices with your values. I mean, most people, in the U.S. would want to do better, right? And, if they want to do better, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, whether, you don't pay sick days or you don't have livable wages or you want to do all of that stuff, but you don't know how, we want to work with you. And so that's kind of the idea behind the roundtable. So the roundtable is a network of, about 70 to 100 employers around the country who are interested in having a triple bottom line business, who are interested in transforming the restaurant industry and showing that they can do better. So we have employers who are celebrity chefs to, small business owners, and through this network, they're able to share tips and resources for how they can provide livable wages or benefits, or even simple things like how to meet OSHA standards. And they are also engaged in our worker justice campaigns that Sarah alluded to. They will speak at local events, or they will go on the Hill and talk to congresspersons about the need to lift this industry. And they are also hosting a lot of workforce development trainings, whether that's through our CHOW program or having their own internal training program. So these employers are really interested in changing the industry, and we are supporting them by creating this network. And one really exciting thing that we're working on right now is partnering with the American Sustainable Business Council, which some of you may know is a network of businesses around the country who are interested in a more sustainable economy. And I would say that we define sustainability not just in terms of the environment, but sustainability in the workforce. So we're really excited about this new this new development. Jim, actually, could you go to the next slide? I failed to. Great. So the next piece of the work is the color. So we have the roundtable employers who are setting up this model for how the restaurant industry should look, how we can do better. And colors is ROC's own personal vision and model for an alternative. And we really see it as a space that is an alternative voice to the National Restaurant Association. And we're showing that people can, people of color and workers can really play a key role in managing and setting up restaurants that are about good food and also good labor practices. So just a little bit of history about Colors. We opened the first Colors in 2006 with 40 immigrant workers. It's a worker-owned restaurant, and it's just a beautiful story when you can and Sarah, maybe you can add a little bit more about this, but it's a beautiful story when workers, who are, women or people of color or immigrants can finally see themselves in a position of management, and coming together to say that we don't just need to make great wages as servers or as a sommelier or go up the career ladder, but that career ladder actually goes as high as management, and being able to own something. And when we talk about the income divide, there's also a wealth divide, and so this is part of a model and an ecosystem where folks can really set their sights high. So we opened this first Colors restaurant in 2006. It was worker owned, and we were able to open another restaurant in Detroit in early 2012. And that has been really successful, and it has, that restaurant, the Colors in Detroit, has a much more specific focus on workforce development and training, which is beautiful. And part of that piece is they're training workers how to become better servers or bartenders, and focusing on front of the house positions where the pay is higher, but at the same time they're also in this innovative space of getting workers to see themselves as part of a larger movement and to see themselves as emerging business owners. So they have a co-op academy that they're launching this year, where they're going to teach students, restaurant workers, cooperative business management skills, and also give them small loans to help incubate these cooperatively run worker-owned enterprises. And in a place like Detroit, where there is a lot of unemployment, especially around the minority, people of color community, like this is an amazing way to say that we can train up these people, and they can actually for themselves create a vision for a better world. And the last piece of our work, Jim, can you get to the next slide, please? So that's a picture of Colors in New York. And so the last piece of our work under the high road is CHOW, and this is kind of the core of our workforce development program. And right now we have a couple of modules focusing on front of the house, and the idea behind that is really creating this career ladder for folks in the industry, to start from wherever they start, but to advance and get to those higher paid positions with health care or a 401k benefits. and we are focusing on front of the house because that is, where the higher paid jobs are, but at the same time, we're not forgetting the back of the house, and, our folks on the ground who are running child programs will partner with other institutions or groups or high road employers to provide back of the house training as well, but our focus, with ROC is front of the house. And over the years, we've been able to train over 3,000 workers and place 65 to 75% of them in livable wage jobs, and which is really great. And many of these jobs are actually provided by our high road employers, so you can see that it's kind of this amazing ecosystem. And so for CHAG, you get the hard, the hard skills and training. You're getting up this career ladder. And the amazing piece, which I think is really exciting, is the partnerships that we're doing with community colleges. So we have partnerships in Detroit and in New York with community colleges who have agreed to give credit to the students who graduate from our child program. And so it's an amazing vote of confidence from these colleges to say, hey, if you go through this program, we're going to support you in your own career path, whatever you may choose, whether that's going up the career ladder in the restaurant industry or staying in college or moving on wherever you may go. And so it's been really exciting work and really successful. We're hoping to replicate this in 5 other cities this year, in Miami, in LA, in New Orleans, Philadelphia, and DC. And to really make this CHOW impactful and helpful for the graduates, for the students and the workers, we are also working to create a CHOW certification, similar to, a ServSafe or something like that, where when a student graduates, they can put a CHOW certification on their resume, and that means something to the industry. It means that they've gone through these, service and beverage modules. They know how to they're aware of, OSHA laws or regulations, and at the same time, they also have this political education and leader development training. And so, CHOW is amazing, not just because it's helping people move up the career ladder, but it's taking a holistic approach and look to educating people of color, young people, immigrants in the restaurant industry workforce by providing them with political education and leadership development opportunities so that they can actually understand themselves in this larger ecosystem, and understand themselves as citizens who can then, contribute to workplace justice campaigns. So, it's not just getting people better jobs, but it's really making sure that the workers are able to become leaders and lead this movement to transforming the restaurant industry.
I'm so sorry. I'm once again having a few technical difficulties. I think we've. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just going to come back and wrap up on ROC before we, I guess, move on to questions, or Jim was also going to speak. So thank you, Nin. That was really great, describing the high road. And as I said, I really want to emphasize the high road piece is very connected for us to promoting our policy and equity work. And so it's the two sides of the coin, right? Helping people move up the ladder and also doing job training as we're simultaneously directly confronting barriers to moving up the ladder and also lifting the floor. And so the newest piece of our work is this multi-year, multimedia consumer engagement campaign that really is organizing consumers, diners of food, eaters of food, to support our efforts at the federal level in terms of moving policy and at the local level and supporting our workplace justice campaign. So the consumer engagement campaign started with a national diners guide that we put out that I don't know how many people have seen, but it's gotten over, I think at this point, 200,000 downloads. It's a guide that we put out now annually that tells the minimum wage, paid sick days, and promotion practices, meaning, equity practices, equity of opportunity of advancement practices of the 150 most popular restaurants in America, and also gives awards to our high road partners, awards that they can put up in their window and let consumers know that they're a high road restaurant that does promote from within. and also awards in the guide itself. We also created a smartphone app that several thousand people have downloaded. You can go on your smartphone and download it. It's called ROC National Diners Guide. It's free. Then we've written the book, which is coming out next week. Danny Glover's movie company has created a series of short films based on the workers and employers profiled in the book, and they're making a full-length fiction feature film on the story of ROC that's coming out in 2014. All of this is meant to inspire, engage, and educate consumers, and so we're creating a new consumer organization called the Welcome Table, which is actually going to be putting pressure on the industry every time people eat out and on Congress for change in our industry. So in all of these ways, we're actually engaging the three stakeholders of the industry: employers, both high road and low road, workers through organizing and campaigns and training, and consumers through education and engagement to really, as I said, both lift the floor and help people move up the ladder to better jobs.
Well, Saru, thank you so much, and Nin as well. I think we have a few questions. I certainly do. I also know that some of our panelists may want to ask questions. I want to first acknowledge that Jack Hill, the director of NNSP, is also joining us on the line. And Jack, sorry not to have introduced you before, but if you've got questions, please feel free. You're right, the research and very. So I wondered if you could say some of what you've learned about both the value and the process of different kinds of research that you've done.
Sure. So, you know, we started doing research back in 2003, just a few months after we opened ROC. We now have published over 20 reports, as I mentioned, and for the most part, they've been what we call participatory research, where we actually train workers and stipend them to conduct surveys of their fellow workers in the industry. And that's been incredibly effective because it serves multiple purposes for us. It both allows us to collect data that we can put into reports that are academically sound and have integrity. You know, I'm an academic in the other half of my life, and we involve a lot of academics around the country in guiding these studies. So, you know, they are academically sound, and yet they also allow workers to lead the process and to develop their leadership skills by conducting the surveys. And it's an amazing base-building tool. We actually bring in hundreds of members. So every time we do 500 surveys, we typically bring in 200 members because it's a wonderful way to actually talk to workers and bring them in. But we've also done studies, like I mentioned, match pair audit testing studies, where we train workers to actually go in pairs, white and people of color, to see who will get hired. We've done ergonomic studies of the industry. We had a huge $1 million study funded by the National Institute for Health to do a study of ergonomics in the restaurant industry. All of this has been great because it's allowed us to publish reports that allow us to get attention for our policy campaigns. They've also actually helped us meet high-road employers. You know, when we do interviews with high-road employers for research purposes, we meet employers who care about what we care about, and then we're able to engage them in the work. Mm-hmm. And then all of it has been kind of, you know, put together into a book, which now is also allowing us to raise the profile of these issues much more broadly, especially to consumers. So research has been incredibly useful.
If I could follow up by asking a little bit about the complementarity of the, say, confrontational work that you do with low-road restaurant employers and the cooperative work that you do with high-road employers, and how you manage those two sets of relationships. Is it simply because they're different actors and you're able to sort of segment your relationships that way?
No. No, definitely not. Nin said something that's really key and important for us. We strongly believe, and have come over the last 10 years to fully understand and embrace the idea that nobody is evil or good. Nobody, I mean, or perfect. There's no evil or perfect actors in our industry. Everybody can do better, even our high road partners. And it's about moving people along the high road, moving people from the low road to the high road. So Mario Vitali, for example, who we had a campaign against, now has joined our roundtable as a partner promoting the high road to profitability. And at the beginning, sure, it was hard to get people to see, you know, since we were confronting this stuff directly, it was hard to get high road employers to come on board because they saw us as confrontational. But as we developed, it's all about relationships. As we developed relationships with more and more high road employer partners, they saw others like them joining, and they saw a safe space in which they could meet other high road employer partners. And as our high road partnerships have grown, we now have 100 employer partners around the country. That piece of work has gotten easier and easier, and our line about anybody can do better, anybody can learn, has become true because we have employers who can teach other employers about how to take the high road.
I really appreciate that you said that. I know one of our registrants, in saying what they wanted, they hoped we would talk about on this session, said, in fact, that they hoped we would move away from blame. And it sounds like maybe it's responsibility if we all shoulder responsibility for addressing.
That's right. Yeah, that's totally true. We right now have a campaign against exploitation and discrimination in Darden restaurants, which are the owner of Olive Garden, Red Lobster, Capitol Grill Steakhouse, Longhorn Steakhouse, the world's largest full-service restaurant company. A group of workers of color approached us from those restaurants and said that they were being discriminated against, and we've launched a national campaign. Now, even we do not say Darden is the evil company or that, you know, the people involved leading Darden are evil. No, that is not our language. We say, Darden, you are a leader in this industry. You're the world's largest full-service restaurant company. We'd love to see you do better because you set the standard. So set a better standard, Darden. And that's exactly that. Today, in fact, we're having a national call-in day where people are calling in from around the country to say to Darden, love your endless salad bowl at the Olive Garden. Would love to see workers have paid sick days because I want a healthy meal. So it's that kind of encouragement rather than, you know, maybe what people think of as blame. That's work, you know. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and Nin, you too. I want to essentially wrap up. Was that member of our panel wants to say something?
Yeah, Jim, so I just wanted to add really quickly that the other piece of the high road that I think is really amazing is that it shows the low road employers that there is a better way to do business. And I just want to give a really quick snapshot of one of our high road employers called Zingerman's. So they started as a 2-employee deli in 1982 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they've grown to an award-winning company with 9 businesses employing 575 workers. And they gross over $40 million a year. And the way they've been able to do that is really investing in their workers and treating them as, you know, dignified, like future leaders of their businesses, and people who have worked up the career ladder in Zingerman's have come up to be partners in their restaurant group. And so it's a really amazing story, and that's kind of what we're trying to show through the high road, you know, show the low road employers that it's actually profitable, and it's good for them to, you know, invest in their workers and to, you know, pay the thrivable wages and the benefits, and really think about internal mobility and capacity building.
Okay, thank you. We have a Okay, so I will just say in wrapping up that at the Insight Center we have a strong interest in issues of disparities in economic security involving both assets and income. Earlier I mentioned that the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative here is very focused on the difference in assets or wealth that people of color have as composed to white in this country, and it's dramatic. And in the income area, we really have focused very much on the role that sector initiatives can play in helping to address disparities in earnings and employment as a contributing factor for economic security. So these are some of the reasons why we think that sector initiatives can play a key role, quite apart, or in addition to the really fantastic examples, and there are many others, that you've just heard. I won't go through them, but we think that the sector, the industry sector matters, and the disparities can vary according to the sector and the region, and that sector initiatives are really well positioned to have an impact on some of these issues. And in particular, we think that sector initiatives can both take programmatic steps to address disparities. So by identifying a disparity and developing a programmatic solution to increase access to those jobs, sector initiatives can make a difference. But then they also can play, as you've heard today, there's a lead role in changing the systems that affect employment in the industry. And earlier this week we had a webinar on this concept of systems change. You'll be able to find materials from that webinar on our website shortly. Just in brief, what we think it might look like, and what we've seen that sector initiatives have done, are some of the elements of making change. Some analysis of employment disparities that provide the basis for engagement and also informs the strategies that are going to make a difference. And I think we've heard that in both the restaurant sector, as ROC-United has done, and in the construction sector in Portland. Communication about those disparities in ways that create a sense of urgency and advance the public debate. And then, as I mentioned, those two means of responding to the disparities. So we would like to see more and more sector initiatives around the country pursuing this kind of intentional approach in their work to addressing the disparities. We don't have time for further questions now, unfortunately, but I think we've done a good job of having a discussion with our panelists throughout. I want to flag for folks our next webinar, which will be happening on February 26th. We actually have two webinars that are very focused on the nuts and bolts aspects of implementing effective sector initiatives and workforce development programs, which I think are going to be very exciting. And so I'd encourage you to look at those and sign up if they are of interest. Also, we take very seriously, and we do our best to incorporate feedback from attendees in our sessions. So it may take you 30 seconds, maybe less, to just give us some quick input on what you found useful about this webinar, what you think can be improved next time. And we will read all of those and do our best to change and continue to get better. And I see that you're not seeing these screens for some reason. So technical difficulties may be one of your items of feedback. What I will do is I'll just thank our wonderful, fantastic panel, Algernon, John, Saru, Lynn. You clearly have great expertise and passion for this topic, and frankly, your work is inspiring to me and no doubt to many of the others who are participating in today's session. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. And then finally, I'll just say thank you for participating. We look forward to your joining us for future webinars in the future. If you would like to let me know your feedback directly, or if there's something that you heard today that you want to apply in your work, please contact me via email. You can't see my screen my contact information, but it will be included in the materials that will be sent out after this session. And last, I will encourage you to become members of NNSP to continue to have access to sessions like these, and also to support NNSP in our activities on behalf of advancing and supporting the sector field. So you can find information about that and about and a whole lot of resources for sector initiatives at www.nnsp.org. Thanks very much. This session is over now. Hope you have a great afternoon or evening, and all the best until next time. Bye-bye.